Before you start any negotiation, you need to figure out what style you're going to use. You need to be able to deal with all of them. In my negotiating book, Create a Great Deal, I discuss two types of negotiating, competitive and cooperative. The Harvard Project on Negotiation, they also have two types, win-win and win-lose. Our two different designations have their differences, but they're similar. Competitive negotiation is all take and no give. You try to claim all the value for yourself. The reason it's called win-lose is that whatever I gain, you lose. This distributive style feels like there's a very fixed size of the pie, and the more pie I take, the less pie you get. The parties do not share much information about what's important to each of them, and there's very little empathy for what's important to the other party. On the other hand, cooperative negotiating starts with the realization that each party values each component of a deal differently. For example, a buyer who's living with his parents for however long he wants is not as concerned about the closing date of a sale as a seller who has to move to Chicago and be there before the start date of his new job. So this difference in value creates the opportunity to create more value in the deal, just like increasing the size of the pie. Now, the next stage in this style of negotiation is a trade, so that whoever values the component the most gets what they need. The other party gets something that they value the most that's of similar value. So the parties treat the negotiation as a cooperative effort, just like working together to solve a problem or working together to put a puzzle together. You have empathy for the other party, which is very important. This style of negotiation involves sharing a lot of information, and before you start using this style and start sharing, you need to know that the other party is going to collaborate and cooperate. Otherwise, they're going to get a lot of valuable information and use it against you. An example will make it more clear. Take a buyer who's an investor who wants to buy a house for retirement and rent it out until they retire. Their most important thing is a good price. The sellers are having a house built. Their most important thing is getting the current house sold so they have the money in the bank to complete the transaction on buying the house, and they want to move once from the current house to the new house. In a collaborative negotiations, the negotiators will learn what motivates each party and put together a deal with a low price for the buyer, a quick closing so the seller has the cash to proceed with the purchase of the new house. Then the seller rents back the property, so the seller only has to move once, and the buyer gets a tenant right away without having to spend a dime fixing up the house or waiting to find a tenant. So if instead you did this as a competitive negotiation where you don't share information, just take that position and try to be firm. So the buyer offers a low price, which insults the seller, and so the seller gives them a high counteroffer. The sellers get a closing date that doesn't really work, but they have to live with that because the buyer's being a little tough on that, and so they have to move to a rental. As a result of this additional expense, they're going to hold out for a higher price. Then after the sale closes, the buyer spends thousands fixing up the property and waiting around trying to get a tenant. Unfortunately, most people think that negotiation is doing battle, and they use a win-lose style. Experienced negotiators know that it's better to collaborate, to see the full picture, and to solve everyone's problems. This way, the deal closes gracefully as each party gets what is important to them. So, if you have a difficult negotiation and you need some help, contact me at negotiatingconsultant.com. That's negotiatingconsultant.com, and we'll work together to solve your problem. Thank you.